How are we all doing? Just waiting for people to begin to join. I don't want to start immediately. I don't want to get too ahead of the game for you guys eagerly awaiting to join the session where we're going to talk about maturing cheese at home, what kind of techniques we use here. So that's what we're going to go through. So I'm going to just wait a few minutes and ramble on a little bit until I feel like maybe we begin. But maybe a first thing to start off is a little bit about me. Some of you know me. I'm Perry from Rennet Rind. We're based in Cambridge and we are Affineurs. So you guys are the first people to see, I believe, no actually I did a small virtual before this, in our new maturing rooms. So yeah, this is a new setup, so I'm kind of getting used to it, where we built more rooms to mature more cheese for you guys, and and just have more tools to be able to get the best out of the cheese. So yeah, so I'm the chief of cheese here at Rennet Rind, also a director, and essentially I look after every cheese that comes through our doors. And a little bit more about me, I won Affineur of the Year. So Affineur of the Year, which was awarded by the Academy of Cheese, and the event, which was pretty amazing, where we all matured cheese up, and I'm hoping to share some of those tips with you and have a bit of fun this evening. So this event will be in like 2 parts if my timing's good. The first part is going to be the techniques I use, brushing, we do a bit of ironing, and we do it all live here so you can see the techniques that I use. And then you can see the other half of that is I'm going to teach you guys how to make your own mini maturing room in your own fridge, which may be fairly difficult, but I'm going to show you by using a shoebox actually, so that should be quite fun. So so let's begin, and I think the first place to start would be kind of the best tool that I have in my arsenal, which is brushes. Like, I love brushes, you know, so all the cheeses that you see that are around us are covered in microflora, rinds and everything, and basically, although that microflora essentially creates flavour, creates diverse kind of complexity within the cheese, and what we do is that we want to establish that. So you kind of got 2 types of mould. You've got flat moulds. It's more complicated than this, but we've only got half an hour. Flat moulds, which are kind of asexual and they spread out, and you've got filament moulds, which are kind of like trees with seeds on the end. And you basically have to identify what kind of cheeses they are, and essentially, you know, like what kind of mould you're getting, and then treat them in a way that will make them like the best that they can be. So there's a couple of like techniques that we can use. First up, this is the mic brush, I will not use that one, is the kind of, I kind of call it like we'll use a Biofilled. So this is actually a wash cheese. We wash this in local rapeseed oil. Juliana makes it and sends it down to us, and then we continue maturing it here. And essentially, when you've got flat surface moulds, which there might be some better examples around here, perhaps actually, I shall use the Rachel's instead. 1 second. Yes. So you might be able to see that, the flat moulds that are on there. And essentially, we don't want to displace them, like it off the cheese. We want to encourage growth. So essentially, we get our brush, and then we do small concentric circles on the cheese. Now this is quite time consuming, can take a bit of time, that's the labour of love of cheese. And as you're going through them, you're displacing those moulds and encouraging them to grow elsewhere, which will allow these little yellow chrysosporiums grow. So with the Rachel, we have 1 mega cheese, which is covered in this mould, and we do that one first and then come across to all the other cheeses. And that will create good growth on the outside, creates good flavour. I always feel like these moulds are subject to opinion, but they give a slight little mushroomy edge to the cheese. These are quite subtle, milky, almond milk sweetness that you get in the cheese. And a little touch of that kind of mushroom is always quite nice, which is good. But I should also mention the British Cheese Weekender, actually. No, Big Cheese Weekender. It's changed its name. We've got international. It's been amazing, obviously. You know, Tracy and Patrick set this up 3 years ago now, and it's just always an honour to be invited back to actually talk about British cheese and what I do for a living, and cheese in general. So I'm really happy to have everyone here. So yeah, and then I'm going to talk about an aggressive. I'll go back to the Bible. So when we first get a cheese in, there's some flora that's on it that may not play well with our rooms. So these rooms are temperature controlled, humidity controlled, we've got airflow going on, all designed to give the best out of the cheese, and someone's asked if my wife can come around with a brush. Okay, that's Keith. He needs a bit of a brush down. I try and answer all your questions as I go, or I interlink them to what I'm saying. So I call this one like the scrub. So essentially I hold the brush just like this kind of, and then across the cheese, right? And these bristles are firmer bristle on the brushes that we use. And this cheese has formed a rind, but the younger ones that we get in, they're not quite well established. And what you're doing with that firmness and the bristles, you're actually creating little lines that are kind of across the cheese, allowing our microflora, our great microflora at Rennet Rind, to really permeate the cheese and create like our own flavour and do clever things with the cheese. So that's firm pressure, kind of back and forth, and that kind of primes it ready for these rooms. The last one, which is gonna need a bigger cheese for this. So this is Spark and Hope Red Leicester, the only, in my opinion, the only traditional red Leicester that's made in the UK. That's supplement to an amazing cheese, but has a bit of a mite issue on it. So mites are alive, they're in the rind, they do clever things. And a lot of people want to rid them, but I like to tend to them and get like a garden kind of going on. They create little divots in the cheese, which creates more escape for moisture, and you get a more different texture on it. But essentially, when we're doing brushing mite cheeses, so we've got the special mite brush, we brush, so you might be able to see that. I'll flick at the camera. No, you won't. Like a little bit of dust that comes off, and that's us getting rid of the mite. So you want to do this in a safe area, not onto other cheeses like I'm doing now, but for the purpose of presentation, that's kind of what I'm up to right now. So yeah, so you brush that mite off. Some still remains, you don't want to be too hard, and then you kind of think, well, it is where it is, and that's fine, and you keep an eye on it, and you do that every week. So that's often a way to cultivate those mites and make sure they're doing really good things on the cheese. And then I think I talk a little bit about, which now this sounds pretty boring, but I talk about types of brushes. So we kind of work with two brushes. One is a artificial brush. So there's kind of two big differences really. Is it the tenderness of the brush, so soft to hard. But the main thing is actually how oily these are, right? So essentially a non-natural brush, an artificial brush, is not that moist, and essentially as you brush into the cheese you have spore-like cheeses. So this is spenwood, and this has got a good degree of like a penicillin dust on there, which I think, suspect that these might be a filament mold, which I don't want to brush these back in the cheeses because I don't want too much of that mushroomy kind of edge that we get. So essentially, let's get rid of that white brush, I don't want to be putting light on there, and essentially what we're doing with this one, we use a soft brush and brush it on the top. So already we can see the colour difference, I don't know if you saw that. And what it does, those spores, because the unnatural brush, the natural brush, the horse's hair has oil in it, those spores get trapped in the brush. So you're kind of limiting that procreation that's going on there of those molds that we don't want. I bet you didn't think that you'd be spending Friday afternoon talking about molds all day, did you? So that's kind of like the primary. So we have artificial, which is drier, good for scrubbing, good for displacing molds and not locking them into the brush. And then we have horsehair, which is kind of a little bit more organic, oily, which will trap those spores that go into the air into the brush. So we kind of limit their procreation across the cheese and the flavours that are in there. And then one of the biggest tools, I always like doing this live because I always get it wrong, that we have is this, a cheese iron. So a cheese iron is a way that, back in Victorian eras, they'd have to like cut open the whole cheeses and waste the whole cheeses. Got an amazing batch of cheddar here, Afford. Amazing cheddar, and essentially I don't want to cut this cheese open because that would be a huge waste, and we use cheese irons to break into it. So I will try this awkward angle and go into the cheese, give it a little twist, I'll give it a couple more twists. Last time I did this from this angle, it did not go that well. Rachel loves a bit of mould as a fellow moulder. So yeah, and then we're just going to analyse the cheese and take a look at what key thing for me is back of the blade, the amount of moisture that's on there. We've obviously got a bit of cracking in there, so maybe that's a bit dry, maybe something's going on with the cheese, but nothing too crazy to think of. And then the consistency that's across, so we've got a gradual inner coming from outer, so that's a nice maturing thing that's going on. Aroma, yeah, that's pretty good. You know, we've got that kind of grassy, typical mature cheddar kind of notes, a bit of savoury, and a little bit of nut in this one, which is quite nice. I haven't seen that in Hafod for a while, so yeah, so that's quite nice. And then, do you know what, for the purpose of camera, I will try it a little bit. So, delicious. So salt of the earth, that cheese. It's just got some real minerality about it. A touch too salty, but then it pulls it back. It's really kind of savoury at that point, which is absolutely delicious. And then we pull that out, that little area here, push it down on these sides. There you go. And then, lo and behold, it's as good as new. It's as good as new. Yeah. And that's kind of what we do in the rooms. I did have plans to wash cheese, but logistically it leaves me a little bit challenged. But there's another thing I need to talk about actually, which is really important, which is biofilms. Biofilms are majorly important. Biofilms are the contact of the cheese onto the surface. So essentially, moulds on the outside. We've got Scandinavian redwood pine here, which kiln dried to 12.5%, which we've resaturated with our own humidity, so it controls it really well. And then essentially the mould wants to grow out. So it will grow onto the boards, and essentially you create your own little garden of mould. So let me just grab, here's what I did earlier. You might be able to see, there you go, you can see them on there. There you go, so that's Sporandema on there, which is a really great mould for some of our cheeses. So we get the new cheeses, look at all those love hearts. People out there love the mould, don't they? So we place the cheese on these, and essentially it creates a new kind of mould, and will encourage that on the cheese. So you kind of get historical passed down of moulds, like generational moulds, which is very, very cool. And not only it delivers flavours, they look very pretty as well. You know, they look very, very different, and it's nice to see. So that's an example of how you create biofilm on a board and transfer that to new cheeses, which is great, you know. So now, obviously ask questions if you do. I've got a question in that area, but I'm scared of actually pushing it, but I might push it in a bit, just in case it knocks off. I'm going to teach you how to look after cheese at home and create your own maturing room in your own fridge. Subject to, everyone has different fridges at home, right? And if you can build your own cave and dig down, then I advise doing that. But if you haven't got a cave, or you haven't got a cellar, which many of us haven't, this is a good alternative to keep your cheese really nice and consistent and fresh. So essentially, this is going to be amazing. I bought some new shoes a couple of weeks ago. And this is what all you need to create a really contained, healthy environment in your fridge at home. So essentially, everyone thinks the enemy of cheese in your fridge is temperature, but it's actually humidity and it's inconsistency. So when you open that fridge, every time you're going from, 8 degrees to 4 degrees to 8 degrees to 4 degrees, humidity down at 12%, humidity up to 8. And remember, we've been talking about molds this whole time. The cheese is just salad drawer, that kind of works at the bottom. But what I want to talk about is actually different layers actually in the fridge that you can use to get the best out of your cheese. So cardboard has a really great way of actually absorbing the moisture in your fridge. So it's great to keep that humidity. And then what you can do, you can lock out the end. So normally you can put holes in here, but this was actually very handy for me because it's got an air. So we want that bad air because there's recycled air. The cheese is breathing in that air and then breathing out bad air. We don't want that stuck all in a shoebox. So we want that to kind of escape out. And these little air holes, if you leave it on the top of your fridge, allow it to move through. So now here's the reveal. Let's see if I can do this. I will open it up of what I've done here. Oh, look at this. A live unboxing of my mini maturing room. So, what do we have in here? Well, once again, we have the contained area and then we have a grill. So essentially the grill, I got this just from Morrison's. It lifts the cheese up and it will do, but you can see that it's got obviously holes in it. So if there's any seepage that happens, it allows the airflow to get around the cheese and cover the cheese that was there. And then we have a little temperature and relative humidity monitor that you can pick up from Amazon. They're about 11 quid. They link up to your smartphone. I love them. I've been using them a lot in these rooms. And then we have a little bowl, which I've taken the water out, but I usually use Evian. It was what I was taught in France. And yeah, I'm essentially doing a Blue Peter on you guys. So so I haven't got my Blue Peter badge yet. I've got many others, but not this. And then you pour the water into the thing, and that will help keep the humidity up. So you're dropping that. So what I did for the last couple of weeks is do a little bit of experiments in our work fridges. So this is where I get extremely nerdy. Anyone who that I won Affineur of the Year knows I love a chart. So essentially, you know, if you can see this, the lines at the top are humidity, and the ones at the bottom are temperature. So what you're seeing as the door opens, or as that condensing unit kicks in, that temperature plummets and goes up, you're seeing these spikes. And they relate to humidity as well. You can see those big spikes when they drop, they really drop with the humidity as well. And what we're trying to do is kind of flatten that curve. So this was kept in there for 8 hours with my Govee reader. And then this is the reader kept in. Try and put that somewhere. This is the reader kept in while we have the shoebox. So we do have a spike here, something happened, nothing will be perfect, it is a shoebox at the end of the day, but what we can see in comparison is a far even journey. Let me just do that and I'll talk through. A far even journey. So this one here is up and down, not good for your cheese. This one up top is far more kind of easygoing and more gentle on the cheese. And this is what these boxes are doing. So I've got 2 cheeses that one I put in here, so I put them in a week ago. So I've kind of unwrapped this on the side just to make sure that my premise works. So we've got a ton worth that we put in there, you know. Who knew? Yes, Jan. You know, Jan is our lovely finance director, and Jan knows how expensive washing and humidifying rooms in Evian water is. So yes, very posh. So great, this is a ton worth. It looks very good on the top. It's got a gentle coverage on the top. So we've put it in the fridge, obviously 2 weeks open. I chose to wrap this cheese, you know, so we've got, let's talk about wrapping cheese, sorry. So cling film will kind of lock the moisture in, and that moisture will try and escape and then rest on the top, and exactly it will just die. So that will die, and it won't create great flavour. So when I open my other one, which has been in the fridge, the cold rooms for quite some time, we should see, hopefully, same cheese, same batch. We should see a stark difference, hopefully, in the cheeses. Not stark, maybe just a subtle one, but that's what we're all here about, maturing cheeses. We're all about subtlety. And there we go, so we can see that already. So that's a week's difference, that is. You know, let me pull them up side by side, you know. So there you go. So you can see that darkness that's coming. That's ammonia that's come into the cheese. So although that might be a desired flavour, it will kill the cheese a lot quicker. It will just speed that up quite a lot. And yeah, so I chose not to unwrap the cheeses because, cling film will suppress the moisture in the cheese, make it lay on top, kill the bacteria, and then essentially it will, most commonplace in a camembert, it will begin to turn to ammonia. Now this one may be really lovely and punchy, but, you know, after 7 days, you're going to get double that and then double that. Your ammonia will tripleate all the time. So you kind of got, that's a new word, tripleate all the time and create different flavours. So you're just going to have a really intense. So the difference is massive in terms of just using a shoebox. And then when you're looking at other cheeses, like you've got your cheddar, they prefer colder temperatures. So the cold part of your fridge is up top, I believe, and then it's at the bottom near the freezer, and then it will come up. So you want to be essentially choosing your cheese in that area, monitoring what's going on. Obviously, the amount of water that you put into the box will change the outcome of the cheese. But in terms of aroma, someone just asked, ammoniated. You know, that there's a little bit of cabbage, but there's some spice that's coming, where this one has a touch of ammonia, more mushroom, more cabbage, more complexity that's in there. And in terms of firmness, so we have a breakdown that's happening more quicker in this one, and this one is breaking down but slower. So nice and gentle, you know, and it's quite interesting to kind of to get us there and see what the big difference is. So I believe someone asked about my Affineur of the Year competition and how I got there. So I matured a cheese which was called Priscilla. And we took a slightly different path. All the documentation is online. We really pulled down the temperature of the cheese. So we pulled it up to about 12, and then loads of brushing and just really looked after it. Where this year the cheese is slightly different for the one we're doing. We done a really unique thing, which was we're dubbing as the Perry mold clap now. So essentially, I got 3 cheeses. So we analysed the cheese, worked out where we thought it would be, looked at 3 of our cheddars, which happened to be Westcombe, Hafford, and Montgomery's, and we thought the moulds that were on there would be conducive to give a good cheese to quicks. And essentially we clamped that cheese on top and then really imparted the mould on the outside. So we've had a burst of like mould on our new cheese for Affineur of the year. And obviously it was a massive, I still didn't believe up to the point where they called my number that we won Affineur of the year. And the amazing thing about Affineur of the year, which I briefly spoke about not too long ago on a podcast, was it was a dual competition. So we had the really critical judges like analysing everything that went on with the cheese, and then we had like a public jury of cheese lovers who went around and tried everyone's cheese. And Priscilla won both categories. So for me, that was the biggest moment there. Essentially, maturing cheese, a lot of people say, oh, you're just doing it to add a couple of quid on top. But it really translates in terms of flavour. Everyone's is really thoroughly interested in, like kind of just getting that fine refinement of what we're doing. And I think there was a cheese in here that I did a tasting on the other day that was turned like 672 times, something like that, which is madness. And it just goes to see like the love of the craft that you have, and obviously all these minor things that most people think don't matter really add up, really add up. I'm going to try and push this button, hopefully, and see. So if I buy a cheese from a cheesemonger and want to continue maturing it at home, tell me, how do you tell how mature it is? It's difficult, years and years of kind of expertise, but essentially, your bloomy rinds and your white cheeses should be white, and as they begin to die, then they become this more orangey brown kind of colour. Some of it is you can ask your deli and say how old is it, and as I was ironing that cheese, you can get your own cheese iron and iron that out and look at how dry that texture is. But pretty much it's quite a difficult, it's such a broad spectrum to work out where those cheeses are and where they sit and what the difference is. Purely because it's just it's 10 years of experience of trying the same cheeses, which is a great privilege, trying the same cheeses week in, week out every year, or day in, day out sometimes. Someone's asked what my favourite mould is. It definitely has to be Chrysosporium, or pseudo, but no, not pseudomonas. Pseudomonas is bad. I meant to say sporandema. So it's that one that's on the Rachel. When I was trading in France, they told us, this is really unique to France. So Rachel and White Lake have like an abundance of it. So I nick a lot of their Chrysosporium to give to my other cheeses because it adds a slight mushroomy edge to it, which I think is quite nice in cheeses. It's really easy and nice to cultivate, which is kind of amazing. So it's nice to think about, cultures and moulds that come from Somerset and now cultivating Cambridge and sharing on many other cheeses that we have here. But yeah, like that's kind of, if anyone has some more questions, please just shout them out. That's the idea with the kind of maturing chamber that you have at home. Cardboard is really good. So I used to advise plastic. And then I heard about cardboard because it just keeps up the moisture and allows that lock-in for the humidity. Obviously, keeping the cheese raised is important to allow the airflow. Obviously, checking in on your cheeses, turning them once a week. Essentially, that's a big part of what I do, actually, which I haven't discussed, which is turning cheeses once a week. So if we have this Hafford, when it's much younger, as the curds knit together, they create what I like to think is little ventricles, little veins through the cheese. And the moisture that's in the cheese is just running all the way through that cheese and creating like those complex chemical reactions which create, complex amino acids where milk can taste like chicken. And essentially, if you don't turn the cheese, all that moisture would come to the bottom. One, visually, it would get a little beer belly like this, and nobody likes a beer belly. And secondly, all that chemical reaction would be happening at the bottom. So essentially, we want to turn it over every day and allow that. I like to think of it, I describe the cracks as a vein, and we're kind of like the heart beating that moisture around, you know. Does the cheese have more mold bacteria because of the milk? Yes and no and yes, which isn't a clear answer. So you get far more diverse wild ranges of mould from raw milk. Things that I don't expect to see on the cheeses, you know, of that style of cheese. Normally they come from raw milk, where pasteurised is a little bit more typical of what you can see. But yes, you get more challenges with raw milk moulds on the outside, and very more interesting things that go out. Yeah, Crafty has a beer belly, we all know that, mate. I have had a wax covered cheese in my fridge for 18 months. Should I release it and cloth wrap it? Now, wax is slightly permeable, so it will use moisture in the cheese. I wouldn't unwax and then cloth bound an aged cheese. You know, I would cut that thing open, because it's a wax cheese. I don't know which wax cheese it is. It could be Black Bomber or Godminster. You know, those cheeses are heavily pasteurised. They're extruded. They crumble together, clump together. You know, they don't particularly create, you know, good bacteria on the outside. And what I would fear, you can give it a go actually, chop it out, enjoy the half, Keith, and then the other half just leave raw. And I guarantee probably in 7 days it'll be covered over in mould for some reason, because it's so, you know, sterile, the environment of extruded wax cheeses. Bad bacteria, and you know, it loves that environment, so it will come to it like pretty hot. So I wouldn't cloth bound it. Do you cover your cheese? Do you cover the cut surface with film? Leave it in the maturing room box still. It depends. It's so versatile. So for one big example is that we've gone through Baron Bygod. Everyone knows a fantastic Breedemo style made just down the road from us in Bungay. Johnny does Crickmore, incredible. And they've actually recently changed their packaging, which has had a kind of negative effect on the cheese. It kind of really locks in that moisture. And the maturing rate in terms of texture has really accelerated it, but not in flavour. So we had a chat with Bungay, and I think they believe they're changing their own wrapping back. So what I would do in that scenario, we unwrapped all our cheeses that we have, because we do 3 different profiles, left them to dry out in our drying room for a little bit, get that initial moisture out there, can maybe re-establish the rind a little bit, re-wrap them and put them in our standard cheese paper, which was similar to the old thing. So each cheese is different. Some of them do better with moulds and things like that, and so someone can listen to me for hours. I could talk about cheese for hours, don't you worry, but I have to go in 3 minutes. Yeah, so it's different every cheese, and I'm sorry that's not a standard answer that people expect, but each cheese is different. Like, we went through a phase of keeping our Spenwoods wrapped, because they were really subjective to cracking, which I believed was the residual moisture, like the unnoticeable moisture on the outside, and then sort of the little dryness that we have in these. These rooms are 10.5 degrees, 88 to 92% at the moment. So that little dryness that we had in there caused the rind to crack. So we wrapped them for a while, but they've actually, now we've got into kind of a different season. They're, I think I have old season and new season here. Like, you can see the difference. So this is, maybe you can't on this camera, but that's a shame. But this one is far more white penicillin that's kind of on the top, which is good. Where we come into the winters, we're getting more brown black moulds, which is so interesting for all the kind of different diverse cultures that are actually within the cheeses. So yeah, every cheese speaks to me different. That's why we hand turn. We don't use machines for that, and there's nothing wrong with using machines. There's fantastic cheesemakers like Westcombe and Lincolnshire Poacher, who's got Tina Turner, and I can't remember what Poachers is called. I need to remember that. I think it's like Flo the Machine, or Florence and the Machine. Anyway, we're micro Affineurs. We don't have massive stores, but what it means, we can get our hands on every single cheese. And when we get a really nice batch and it can mature for longer, we take that to one side and mature it for longer. So that kind of hands-on cheese. And yeah, people have said they can see the difference, and I really appreciate that, wondering that you can see it. I'm glad it seems like everyone enjoyed, which is amazing. And obviously, you know, if you want to check us out, www.rennetandrind.co.uk. On Thursdays, I'm in here all day. So if you want to FaceTime me and talk about cheese, one, you'll keep me company. Two, I can pick the best of the batch for everyone. So that's my half an hour up, and yes, I could talk for ages, but I'm not going to anymore. You can tune on, the next one is on Zoom, so you need to go to the Academy of Cheese website, and it is an Alpine cheese with Lucy Coughlin. I think they're making tartiflette, a little journey. So yeah, swing on over there, go to the Academy of Cheese website, get that loaded up, and it's a Zoom, so if you've got it downloaded, it will take 2 seconds. Enjoy your big cheese weekend, and go out, buy tons of British cheese, really support our amazing industry. Thanks a lot, guys. Take it easy.